Well, thanks, everyone. It is my honor to present our next speaker, Dr. Richard Wong, who certainly needs no introduction. Rich currently serves as the Chief of Head and Neck Service in the Department of Surgery at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and holds the J&P Shaw Chair in Head and Neck Surgery and Oncology. Rich was my first resident, one of the first residents I met when I arrived at Mass Pioneer as a PGY2 resident. He quickly took me under his wing and was instrumental in me pursuing a career in head and neck oncology. I recall a night that we still talk about, even today. I just spoke about this night with Mark not too long ago, where we got a stack call on the 11th floor. Back then we had two residents on call, a senior and a junior. He was my senior resident. Came up to the 11th floor and found him holding pressure on the neck of a patient with a carotid blowout. Shortly after, Mark Favers came in, and I vividly remember what he was wearing, a Mickey Mouse t-shirt and shorts, and said, quote unquote, "Hey, what's going on, guys?" So Mark and Rich and myself wheeled the patient down to the OR with Rich on the bed, holding pressure, and going down to the OR. And miraculously, Mark and Rich saved his life. I couldn't have asked for better mentors and role models at that time. I also want to point out this picture. This is a picture back in, I think, 2001, 2002, shortly after 9/11, where we were both at Memorial Sloan Kettering, so I've kind of followed his career. And although I want to point out a few things. Number one, if you see Rich next to me here, I'm still jealous at how much hair he still has, as my family reminds me that I've lost all my hair, so I always want to point that out. Second, you'll notice two people look a little bit different than others. One is myself. I won't mention who the other person is. And one of the things that Rich has always tried to teach me, which I still haven't learned, is read my emails completely. And the residents know this. They have to put in bold the pertinent parts of an email that I need to read. We were supposed to all wear white, and certainly Dr. Shaw did mention that. And so for the residents, even I didn't listen to Dr. Shaw. So anyway, and lastly, I just want to point out that we are so proud, and I want to highlight that Rich is the first otolaryngologic chair of head and neck surgery at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center following a lineage of general surgeons. What an amazing accomplishment. So thanks, Rich, for being here today, and look forward to hearing your thoughts and wisdom.
So this is an incredible privilege to be here today, and I, like Mike, was surprised when I was invited to speak here. And it's really humbling to come back here, the place that was so essential for my development. Probably the most important 4 years of my life that shaped my professional career, my personal development. It crafted friendships and mentorships and relationships that are important to me to this day. And coming back really feels like I'm coming home. It's like that family reunion at that vacation, the holiday, seeing all these friends. It's incredible. It brings back a flood of emotions, and I can't express what it means to me. So thank you so much. This is my class. I hear John Ansley's here today. Are you here, John? John, I want to hug you later. I miss you. John Ansley, Sandy Kathju, Albert Assad, Harold Chow. And we formed these close friendships because we shared so many intense experiences crunched into a 4-year period. So many nights together, so many weekends, emergencies, OR cases. And you just can't recreate that. That you cannot recreate that in any other environment. And so that's why we have to treasure that. And actually, when I left the Pioneer, I took this picture when I was going to my car. This was the last time I was going to be at the Pioneer. I turned around. I brought my camera that day, and I took this picture. You see, there's no Liberty Hotel there. I actually slept above the jail last night. It was crazy. But it looked kind of lonely, and I always kept this picture. It looked lonely, a little sad, and that's actually how I was feeling. I actually didn't want to leave the Pioneer. I wanted to do head and neck cancer. I wanted to follow Mark's footsteps, Dick Fabian's footsteps, but there was no fellowship here, so I had to leave. And I went to New York to Memorial, but I didn't want to leave. And I'm actually, if there was a fellowship at Mass Pioneer, I would have definitely applied for it because I was so reluctant. So I look back and I think, what are the lessons I learned from Mass Pioneer? And I decided to distill it down into the three lessons, okay, just to make it kind of simple. And the first lesson is I think I learned how to approach learning. Obviously, at the Pioneer, you learn a ton of material. You learn facts, you do well on the in-service, you learn to take the boards, you basically learn how to operate, take care of patients. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I mean is that I feel like there is a philosophy here that teaches its trainees how to approach learning and to answer questions that have not yet been even asked. So this is me in the OR with, I don't know if you guys remember Patrice Barrow on the left and Jean Ann Phillips in the middle. This was in the late 90s. I think I'm closing a fibula, okay, because I'm sitting and that's the leg. And I think Mark and I had done quite a few cases together. We did a patient who had an oral cavity cancer. We did a segmental mandibulectomy. We did the fibula flap. We borrowed the fibula and inset it. Beautiful case. It was state of the art at the time. And then when the pathology came back, Mark came to me and said that the bone margin was positive. I don't know if you guys know what this means. That's a bad thing. The cancer is at the edge of where we cut the bone. And you can't just radiate because the radiation doesn't really work well against the positive bone margin. So I think we decided to go back. We decided to go back and re-resect, but then it fouls up the fibula because the fibula is carefully crafted, and then you have to take the hardware down. It was a real problem. And Mark said to me, you know, Rich, how did this happen? How can we learn more about this? He challenged me to try to figure this out, and we decided to go do a literature review at Mass Eye and Ear. We took all the charts for the patients that had these types of segmental mandibulectomies, and we looked at the slides. Suzanne Keel was a pathologist at MGH, and she amazingly looked at all the slides for, I think, 68 patients. And she looked at them with me, and she noticed that the cancer, when it's in the bone, has two different patterns by which it invades. There's the erosive pattern, which is more common, where it pushes like a front. But then there's this kind of sneaky pattern, this infiltrative pattern, where it invades like with little islands at the front. And she noticed that when it's in the infiltrative pattern, the little islands can be far, far ahead of where the cancer front appears to be. It could be sneaky. And then we correlated from the charts the positive bone margin rate, and we found that there was so many more positive bone margins with the infiltrative type. Then we got Bob Glynn, who was a biostatistician, to look at the outcomes and look at survival outcomes, and found that disease-free survival was way, way worse with the infiltrative pattern. People were dying with disease. And so it's hard to predict, but we can try to infer an infiltrative pattern looking at MR or CT scan, and it led to a paper that we wrote. And the paper actually is not really a high-impact paper. I looked on PubMed, and it's been cited only like 70 times in the past quarter century, which is not really that good. But the paper to me meant much more than just the paper. It was like an incredible educational experience. It was the product of Mark pushing me and then helping me along the way to try to answer a question that had not been answered. And I think that's the culture here. Everyone is interested in investigation and finding out more about the disease processes than what we know. And this helps me to this day. I lead a small lab. We study how cancers and nerves interact. We look at perineural invasion. We do mouse models. We look at how Schwann cells create these passages for cancer cells to travel quickly along nerves. We study how tumors become innervated, and the nerves that go into the tumors can fuel their growth. And our lab is constantly learning. We're always going in different directions because the science takes you in different directions. I'm sure you know this, Tina. We're always surprised, and we're constantly learning, and we're using the lessons learned from the Eye and Ear every day. We're trying and experimenting and going into new directions. Okay, the second lesson I learned was the impact of mentorship. And you know, we all have great teachers that we are fond of, but I think on a different level, I've been thinking a little bit more about the impact that these mentors have had on us. And at the time, Mark was a younger surgeon, and I went to clinic with him, and I was surprised. I was surprised that the patients really bonded with him. I'd never seen this before. They treated him differently. He treated them differently. They were kind of like family members. There was a lot of hugging. There was gifts. There's talk during the clinic about relationships and other things that they're doing. It wasn't all medical. I hadn't really encountered that, and I was like, wow, this guy was really loved by his patients. And then in the OR, I was like, whoa, he's really gifted. That's John Lazor on the left. Is John here? John, love you, man. So it's my buddy John, and there's Mark. And so Mark is gifted. He is incredibly talented. But then when you do an operation with him, he doesn't show off. Like when I went to Memorial, we have all these hotshot surgeons, and they're just show-offs, okay? But he doesn't, they're like going fast, and there's international visitors and just showing off. He never shows off. In fact, he just guides you through the case. So he's retracting, and you're dissecting, and you're doing not so good, and he's trying to explain to you what to do verbally, and he won't put down the retractions. He'll just be talking you through it. And I've not encountered that, Mark, since during my fellowship. I didn't encounter that. And I try to do that today, and it's hard. It's really hard. It's hard. And I appreciate it now what you did, because I learned so much as a result of it. The other thing is that he outworked everybody. I would drive to work every day early, to round early when I was on the rotation with him. There's a parking lot that was across the street. And at that hour that I came in, there was very few cars in the lot, okay? Almost no cars. So you can tell who's here because you knew everyone's car, okay? And Mark drove this beat-up kind of old two-door Acura Integra white, like this one, except it was much more beat up. And I could recognize his car. And every time I came in the morning, I was so frustrated because even when I came in really early to really earn round early, his car was already there. It was already there, and it would be wonderful, like two cars there already. And then even worse, then when I went home at night, like sometimes I would go home at like 8 or 9 because I was like trying to get the service really fixed up. His car was still there. So I would walk into the Ioneer feeling really guilty, and then I'd be driving home feeling really guilty. And it was terrible because he just basically outworked me. And the last story I was going to tell you was what Derrick told the story already, the carotid blowout story. So I won't repeat it. It was amazing. I think you didn't do yourself justice, Derrick, because I think you're the one that really controlled that carotid bleed that night. The carotid bleed is just a harrowing experience, and you were amazing, Derrick. But when Mark came in with that Mickey Mouse shirt, okay, the thing he didn't convey was that we were panicked. There was blood everywhere, like on the stretcher, on the sheets, blood everywhere. And it's chaos. You know, people are trying to put IVs in, get blood, people are getting to the OR. Once he arrived, it just ended. Like he was so calm and so controlled. We got him to the OR, he controlled the carotid, he ligated, put a pec valve up, and we were all shook up. He debriefed us in the morning. He gave us credit for saving the life of the patient. No way, we didn't do anything. You saved the life. And then he would send me emails later on, years later, even after I graduated, telling me how the guy was doing. He wanted me to understand that that moment really meant a lot to the patient and the impact that it had. We invited Mark to give a lecture at Memorial. In introducing him, I felt incredibly proud. And even better, I had him meet with our fellows. This is just like not a few years ago. He met with our fellows. He went out to lunch with them. And they sent me this picture. And I felt like you feel like when your parents are hanging out with your kids. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? That warm feeling when you feel like the two generations are meeting. And they were completely floored by him. He gave an amazing lecture on leadership that day. Here he is at his professor celebration with Derrick. This is our carotid blowout team. And here he is with Chris on their rooftop of their beautiful home. Mark, you know, I just want to thank you. It's not just about the mentorship and the teaching. It's for showing me the kind of doctor that I should be and that I want to be someday. So thank you, my friend. I love you. Yeah. I have a couple more words. I'm not quite done yet.
No way.
I have a couple more words. I'm a little bit more. This is my other guy. This is my other hero. Where's Greg? Where are you? Did he take off? Greg. Sorry, you're behind the light. Greg, this is my other hero. This guy, so when I started working with him, I was kind of interested in him because I noticed he was like really crazy meticulous, and he was really obsessed with these voice nerves, these recurrent nerves and supralaryngeal nerves. At the time, I thought it was different. You know, he was so into it and meticulous and clean, and he really cared about preserving these nerves. And he was way ahead of his time. He was into the nerve monitor, and I thought, wow, he's really an incredible surgeon, and he's also really easy to relate to. He's like funny, and he's got this magnetic personality. He's really inclusive with everybody. And so he had a huge impact on me during my rotation with him, and I found myself gravitating towards thyroid surgery. And then my last case of the rotation, we went to MGH to do this big goiter that was substernal, not this exact case, but like this. And he actually let me do almost all of the case. It was incredible. He guided me through it. He really cared about me learning it. And when we delivered the goiter, it really was exciting. I could see he was excited for me. And it went great. The case was amazing. It was that one case was so impactful for me. And the funniest thing is that I hear him tell this story now to other people. Like when I'm speaking or he's speaking, he tells this story, and he tells it as though the moment when the goiter came out was that was my big inspiration. And it was inspiring, but it wasn't really that. I think, Greg, what really inspired me was you and how you mentored me and how you supported me over the years. Of course, Greg has gone on to become the head of everything, AAO, WCTC, ITOG. I mean, just he's the head of everything. And he hasn't forgotten me. So after I graduated, he has been tapping me for things like panels and different positions and committees and organizations, and he's always putting me up on the podium. And I feel like he's the type of mentor that keeps mentoring you onward. And so so now thyroid is about 70% of my practice, okay? And I do a ton of thyroid surgery, especially like the advanced recurrent stuff. And now when I get stuff like this from my patients, I don't get like really fancy gifts, but I get like homemade crafts and things. And this patient wrote this card. I was thinking about Greg, because I think Greg is really the influence that made me really focus on thyroid cancer. And the other types of gifts I get are these weird plush stuffed thyroids, which I have a few of them, and Greg, I'll give you a couple of them, okay? I'm going to speed up. I just wanted to say that there's data that says that the most important formative event is encountering an exceptional role model, okay? There's data for this. And the other thing that I'm going to go through quickly is that the mentor is associated with not just great education, but with wellness, okay? This study just came out this year. It's a survey taken from general surgery residents. And they found that those that had identified really key mentors, one third of them did not, okay, which is really sad. But the 2/3 that did had significantly lower rates of burnout, thoughts of attrition or quitting, and even like things like suicidality, which is sobering. So it's not just education that's better, but it's wellness. And so we have to, just as like Mike Nayak was saying, we have to think about this and really make this a priority. Just really quickly, when I think of Joe Shapiro, I think of like the most supportive mentor possible, always supporting me, always unconditional love almost. When I think of Mike McKenna, I think of this model surgeon scientist. He had a lab. He welcomed me into the lab for summer. I didn't know that surgeons could be great scientists and do great research and be NIH funded. When I think of Dr. J, I think of how he let me do so much in the ER as a PGY2. I didn't know anything, and he would stand behind me and guide me as I was doing, PTA aspirations or, packing noses. And he would even be telling me what to do in front of the patient, and he wouldn't do it himself. He was really committed to education, which as a PGY2 means everything. And then lastly, of course, there's Monty. Monty was incredible. He would describe things in terms that made it so understandable. I remember we did a mucocele removal together in the OR. The mucocele was pushing through the bone. And I said, how can this soft cyst push through the bone? The bone is so hard, like a rock. And Monty turned to me and he just said, well, it's like a tree root growing through a rock. It just takes time and constant pressure. I said, oh, that's really wise. Because he was like an outdoorsman, a craftsman. And I think that maybe that's also the impact that he and all of the mentors here have had on me being the rock, that all of their wisdom over time with continued constant teaching and mentorship can really mold and shape me, which I think is amazing. Last thing is that the camaraderie here is exceptional. I can't explain it. There's so much camaraderie amongst the residents that I feel like it really is like a family. And I've come to realize that this is not just an accident. It doesn't just happen. I think there's something about the culture here that promotes these sort of close relationships. And you have Theo and Shilpa, and you see Tessa, Ju Kim, John, Harold, Daryl. just an incredible group of friends, so many more. I didn't have room to put the pictures. So when I went to Memorial, it was really different culture. It was really formal. It was very, you know, not super warm, not Joe Shapiro warm. It was a tough place. It was a tough place, and we changed it. This is Luke Morris, who's our program director, and he made the fellowship into a really fellow-centered educational program, and it's flourished. Our fellows do amazing things. We're incredibly proud of them. I think they have a lot of fun. The culture of our institution has really changed, and I like to think that just maybe, I brought some of the eye and ear culture and put it at Memorial Sloan Kettering. And maybe that's been a good thing. And so just to close out here, I'm going to borrow from Mike and I. We didn't coordinate this, but some of the things we should do is promote the active learning in our residents and our fellows. We have to learn to become good mentors. We have to pay it forward, and that doesn't just happen by accident. We can learn for all of our faculty. We mentor them through to become good mentors, because teaching doesn't just happen. It has to be learned. Being a good teacher is a skill that you have to develop. And lastly, we have to foster the culture we can enjoy every day. So I just want to say thank you again for giving me the chance to come back here, and it's meant everything to me. Thank you.